to the So You Missed Church podcast. We are happy to have you here with us today. Happy Monday to you. This is Clint Daly, and I'm hoping that if you went to church this week, you got something from it. But maybe you missed church this week. Maybe you just didn't go, or maybe you couldn't go. Maybe you didn't even miss it that much. We're still hoping that we can get your week started in a positive way. So a guy walks into a bar, and he's looking highly stressed. He sits down at the bar, and he orders a drink. And the bartender serves him, and he downs it in one gulp, and he immediately orders another. The bartender brings him another drink, and he promptly downs that one too and taps the bar again for a third. Now the bartender is growing a little concerned. "Hey, buddy, is everything okay?" the bartender asks. The man rubs his eyes, and he says, "Well, no. Actually, I'm not okay. You see, my wife and I got into a fight, and she was so furious with me that she said she wasn't going to talk to me for a month." Now, the bartender has heard the story a million times, so he tries to be positive. He says, "Hey, if you two truly love each other, you're going to figure all this out. And in fact, maybe this could be a good thing. You know, absence sometimes does make the heart grow fonder. And I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but maybe you can even get a little peace and quiet." And the man nods sadly, and he says, "Yeah, you're right. The problem is that today is the last day." Do you ever just feel overwhelmed by the stress of your day, or your job, or your family, or your marriage, or just life in general? Hey, maybe you're dealing with changes at work. Maybe you're dealing with struggles in your marriage, or changes to your family, or changes with relationships, or even with your health. Hey, sometimes life can be challenging, and sometimes we can get overwhelmed, but let me ask you a question this week. How do you cope with those challenges? Do you have a method to cope with those challenges? Now, maybe you work out. Maybe you, get in your car and go for a drive. Maybe you do yoga. Or maybe you have less healthy methods. Maybe you eat to cope with stress. Maybe you have a cigarette. Maybe, like this man did, maybe you have a drink. Hey, we all do what we can to cope with the stresses and the challenges in our lives, right? But let me ask you one more question. Do you have a time set aside that maybe you just get some peace and you spend it in prayer? And no, I don't mean when you sit in traffic grumbling, "Oh my God, please get me past this idiot in front of me that keeps cutting me off." That's not exactly what I'm referring to. No, today I'm talking about taking just a few minutes every day in truly concentrated prayer. Let's go to the Gospel of Matthew. And in chapter 6, Jesus is continuing his Sermon on the Mount. He gives the Beatitudes. He talks about being the salt of the earth. He talks about obeying the law and loving your enemies. And he talks about prayer. And what he says is actually very interesting. Because in verse 5, Jesus says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep babbling on like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him." Now, first off, understand that when Jesus says this, he is actually making the religious leaders of the day furious, because they wanted you to go to them and ask them to pray for you. And then they would stand up in front of everyone and they would do those lengthy prayers with their fancy religious words. But Jesus says, no. Go into your room in private and tell God what you need. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be long. You know, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but there is an old saying, and I believe it goes back to the Jewish community, and it says, when you finish praying, you should be a better person than when you started. When we pray, we tend to think of what we truly, honestly need in life. Our health, our families, our communities, our true needs, not the BMW that we wish we could get. Now, maybe you're not a person who prays. That's fine. Maybe you don't want to speak in front of people. You get nervous. Good news. You don't need to pray in front of anyone. And in fact, Jesus says, go into an empty room and tell God exactly what you need. So here is my encouragement to you this week. Take just like 3 to 5 minutes each day. Go into a room that is quiet. Close everything out and tell God what you truly need in life. Or tell him what you're struggling with in life. Now, it could be the first thing in the morning. It could be the last thing you do before you go to bed. But try finding those few moments of peace in your life each day. And when you do, try working on strengthening that prayer life. Because you might be surprised at how much that little quick moment of prayer and concentration actually changes the way you deal with people and changes the way you deal with the stress and the challenges that you face in your life in general. Hey, remember, you can always contact us at youmisschurch@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to us. We would love to be a source of encouragement to you. You can also follow us over on Facebook or on X at YouMissChurch, and you can subscribe to the podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are hosted, or just go find it over on YouTube. Hey, I wish you all a very happy Monday, and I hope that you have a great week.